I was born in Ohio, actually in a hospital in Dayton, Ohio, but we lived in Xenia on West Market Street, actually. I remember that. The house is gone. I grew up in Xenia. Xenia is a town of about 30,000 people, and still a town of about 30,000 people. I had an older sister, 17 months older, and two younger brothers. When I was in high school, I was in the band. I played the flute, and I was in the marching band. Loved that. I was also in the choir. Was also in a special singing group. I was at one point in a group that went up to Columbus, to the state capitol, and I actually was a soloist with the All Ohio Chorus at one point in singing. So I haven't done that in a long time. But part of my father's family was from Pennsylvania. His mother, I remember Grammy Murray. I remember her when she was pretty old, shortly before she died. And I remember at a time she was sitting on a couch in our living room in our big house, which had two living rooms actually. This is the one we left after my dad died. But she was sitting in the living room and she was crying, and she was kind of sobbing, and I have no idea why. And I was probably 15, so I don't remember. I was 16, I guess, when my dad died. But I have no idea why, but I can still picture that. Of all the things that you remember from your childhood and your grandparents, that's the one thing I remember from Grammy Murray. We moved to California. We were living in Evanston, which is the suburb north of Chicago, and we came to California because my husband was in high tech, and this was Silicon Valley, and this was so we moved to California, and I had the first my two older children at the time, and we came out on the train, which was fun, and I was pregnant with the third at that point. Rented a house in Los Gatos, which is where our best friends, Ed and Carol Spiel, live a couple of doors down. They're still there. But when we went to buy a house in Silicon Valley, we couldn't afford Los Gatos. So we wound up at this house in Willow Glen, where we've been for 40 years, I think.
Yeah.
And it's just fine. We love it, and we're not going anyplace. When my oldest was in kindergarten or first grade, I went back to school at San Jose State and went through and finished my master's degree in geography. They'd hired me in the department to teach classes. Another one of my favorite things at San Jose State was I started a Center for Geographic Education. And what we did was we went out to schools in the area and did little in-service programs. And one of those included painting maps on playgrounds of various elementary schools around the area. I became interested in genealogy. It's been many years, but I took a course. I was taking a course while I was still teaching at San Jose State. And I was taking the course at our local community center, and our teacher had a stroke. And Carol, wonderfellow lady, but it was very tragic when she had her stroke and she couldn't teach anymore. So the other people, my fellow students in the class, decided that I should take over teaching the class. I said, I teach geography, not genealogy, it's geography. And they just laughed at me and said, no, you're a teacher, you can do it. So I took a couple of online courses, I think, and I did some research, and I took over the genealogy class. And I learned more from them than they learned from me, probably, but I taught genealogy in the community centers for about 10 or 15 years, I guess, while I was still teaching geography at San Jose State, and then taught at De Anza for a while. And then I finally decided I didn't need to do that anymore, so I retired from my favorite ancestors, of course, is Orson Smith Murray. And Orson Smith Murray was a very famous abolitionist during the Civil War, and he's my third great-grandfather. And he was very active in the Underground Railroad in Ohio, in Vermont, and in Ohio. And I did a lot of research on him, and finally I found a professional writer who has written several books, published several books in genealogy, and I asked him to do a book on Orson, and he's just now finishing it. So I provided him with all the information I had, and he had information too, but his research was incredible, and he found a lot of other stuff. So he's publishing the rest of the book, the second part, which will be the Ohio portion in before July, middle of July, which is when I will be going to Ohio to a book signing where he and I will both sign the Ohio version of the Orson Smith Murray story, Runaway Slaves. At the end, there was a shed. We saw it when we were there one time. There was a old shed out on the Ohio River, and there was a basement. Well, not a real basement, but there was a very large crawl space underneath this shed, and nobody's been able to prove it. But it was just north of the Ohio River, so if the runaway slaves got across the river, they could hide in there until they were rescued and taken north to maybe Canada or farther north. And I'm sure that was where he hid slaves, was in that building, which was really cool to discover.
Yeah, that is so cool.
There are a lot of significant structures in the Midwest where they hid runaway slaves, but none of them were owned by my third great-grandfather. So I love the idea of the connection, and it's pretty cool. I've been studying his work and the history of that area for a long time, Southern Ohio.
Well, great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Have a great day.
Oh, thank you. You too.